crisp September dawn hung over the Blue Ridge foothills when the gravel finally cracked beneath tires. A sheriff's cruiser rolled up to the orchard fence first. Lights dark, engine low, nothing casual about it. A white HOA SUV followed close behind, like backup arriving for a fight no one had invited. Jeanette Whitmore stepped out dressed for authority, not weather. Clean blazer, hard posture, face set for victory before she had even reached the fence. Officer Daniels climbed out more slowly, one hand near his belt, eyes already carrying the look of a man who suspected he had been dragged into nonsense. Reuben Calloway stood in wet grass beside a split irrigation line, coffee in one hand, wrench in the other. Behind him, 43 rows of apple, pear, and cherry trees burned gold in the first light. Jeanette swept an arm toward the orchard, like the whole property could be condemned by gesture alone. Reuben never raised his voice. He set the wrench down, wiped the dirt from his hands, and reached into his truck. What came out was not panic. It was paperwork. A survey plat, a deed copy, a recorded lien assignment. Then came the quiet explanation that changed the entire morning. The clubhouse Jeanette ruled from sat on land burdened by a Calloway family easement and a debt obligation Reuben now controlled. The color drained from her face so fast it looked unreal. Officer Daniels stopped scanning the orchard and started reading the documents. That moment felt sudden. It was not. It was the result of 2 years of pressure, filings, threats, and one mistake Jeanette never should have made. Reuben Calloway was 51, recently retired after 28 years as a land surveyor. He knew land the way some men knew engines or weather. He could read an old meets and bounds description like sheet music. He remembered property corners the way other people remembered birthdays. In his kitchen, 3 framed records hung on the wall. His grandfather's 1958 deed, the original survey plat, and the county tax record showing the parcel in clear title. No mortgage, no cloud, no confusion. The orchard sat in Harrow County, Virginia, west of Charlottesville, where the land lifted and folded into the Blue Ridge. Chester Calloway bought those 17 acres in 1958 for a number that sounded impossible by modern standards. He planted fruit trees because he believed food gave a man dignity. Reuben's father, Walt, kept the orchard alive through drought, late frosts, lean seasons, and the recession. When Walt died in 2019, the land passed to Reuben intact, stubborn, and beautiful. Life there moved with the kind of rhythm that made sense. Dawn irrigation checks, fence repairs, compost turning in cool morning air, weekend farm stand traffic, children leaving with sticky cider cups, the sweet smell of fallen fruit in September, the first hard frost silvering the rows in October. Then the land next door changed. 9 years earlier, bulldozers scraped the red clay flat and turned the neighboring tract into Sycamore Bluff Estates, a polished subdivision of broad porches, manicured edges, and rules that multiplied faster than weeds. The first HOA president had been sensible. He understood the orchard had been there for decades before the clubhouse, the bylaws, and the monthly meetings. Then came Jet Whitmore. She was 63, a former retail regional manager, and she treated the HOA like a small territory she had been sent to control. She cited ornamental grasses as weeds. She fined a widower over a leaning mailbox. She measured flags, complained about wind chimes, sent violation letters with the confidence of a woman who assumed paperwork was power. Inside Sycamore Bluff, she was feared. Outside it, she believed she should be obeyed. At first, Reuben barely noticed her interest in his side of the fence. Then he began spotting patterns. Her SUV idling near the boundary, her phone lifting toward the compost piles,
her eyes moving across the pump house, the farm stand sign, the deer fencing. At county meetings, she started using phrases like visual corridor, community standards, incompatible use. On Saturdays, while families loaded apples into their cars, Jet sometimes stood near the rise by the clubhouse and watched the orchard as if she were studying a problem she meant to eliminate. Reuben understood maps, lines, and title history. What he underestimated, at least at first, was obsession.
The first move came in February, and it looked too small to matter. Jeanette called the sheriff's non-emergency line and reported Reuben's irrigation pump as an illegal generator operating during a burn ban. There was no burn ban. The pump was legal. Officer Daniels spent less than 5 minutes on the property before leaving with nothing to enforce. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it was the opening shot. By March, the complaints arrived in stacks. Noise violations, signage violations, fence height complaints, drainage accusations, claims that orchard runoff threatened HOA common areas. Every accusation triggered an inspection. Every inspection stole half a day. Every half day meant work delayed, repairs postponed, and attention dragged away from the orchard itself. Every complaint was dismissed. But Jeanette was not filing to win quickly. She was filing to create volume. In Harrow County, complaint records were public. Enough filings against one property could create the illusion of chronic misconduct, even when every single complaint collapsed on contact. That was the first real warning. The second came from Wendell Oakes, a retired attorney who lived inside Sycamore Bluff and had no patience for Jeanette's style of rule by intimidation. He told Reuben she was speaking with a Charlottesville lawyer about a private nuisance claim. That mattered more than the petty inspections. A nuisance case would not be built on facts alone. It would be built on exhaustion, time, expense, pressure. Reuben moved quietly. He called Sandra Puett at the county planning office and requested formal written confirmation that the orchard was a grandfathered agricultural use protected under Virginia law. She provided exactly that, a clean, direct letter confirming the orchard predated the current zoning framework, that the operation was compliant, and that ordinary farm activity would not trigger enforcement. Reuben laminated a copy. He stored duplicates in his safe, his barn, and his attorney's file. Then he did something Jeanette did not expect. He reminded the county who he was before she defined him for them. The Harrow County Ledger ran a feature on the Callaway Orchard's history, complete with old photographs of Chester Callaway standing in front of young trees that now towered over customers. The story spread fast. Residents who had never bought a single apple suddenly understood the orchard had been feeding the county for generations. Support began drifting Reuben's way. Jeanette answered with a lawyer's letter. It claimed the weekend farm stand was a nuisance. Worse, it tried to cite Sycamore Bluff's HOA rules against land that had never been inside the HOA at all. That was the moment the fight stopped being annoying and became personal. Reuben hired Marcus Delgado, a sharp real property attorney from Staunton. Marcus answered with a tight, devastating response built on one simple truth: the HOA had no authority over Reuben's land. Then Reuben did something surveyors do when something feels wrong. He went to the records. Jeanette escalated faster than most people could read the mail. She pushed the HOA board into passing a formal resolution branding the farm stand an incompatible commercial use. Then she carried that resolution into a county hearing room with a consultant's report and a polished presentation. The argument sounded official. It just was not legal. The county dismissed the matter almost immediately. The orchard predated the subdivision. The farm stand sold products grown on site. There was no basis to regulate it as a commercial intrusion.
That public loss did something dangerous to Jeanette. It made her more inventive. Next came the health department complaint. She claimed Reuben's compost piles were really an unlicensed waste operation because he sometimes gave finished compost to an elderly neighbor who repaid him with tomatoes. An inspector reviewed the site and closed the matter with no action, but not before Reuben had to suspend even that simple exchange. Then Jeanette found 2 residents whose back fences touched the orchard and persuaded them to sign affidavits claiming farm stand traffic interfered with their peace. Her attorney used those statements to file for a preliminary injunction aimed at shutting down weekend sales. Marcus had expected that move. The legal response went out almost immediately. What Jeanette did not know was that Reuben had already started pulling every recorded document tied to Sycamore Bluff. The original subdivision plat, the common area conveyances, the HOA and corporation papers, the title chain at the county clerk's office. He read through them late at night the way some people worked through puzzles, line by line, looking for the single mismatch that explained the whole pattern. He found it in the plat description for the clubhouse parcel. One line burdened that common area lot with a permanent right-of-way and access easement held by the owner of the adjacent parcel described in Deed Book 214, page 88. That deed was his grandfather's. Reuben kept reading, and then a second irregularity surfaced in the title history, older, quieter, and far more dangerous than an easement. By the time he closed the file, rain was tapping against the window, and the fight had changed shape completely.
Reuben verified everything 3 ways before he let himself feel the full weight of it. First, the original plat. Second, the clerk's title chain. Third, an independent title search out of Charlottesville. All 3 agreed. Back in 1958, when a county road had been rerouted, Chester Calloway secured a permanent agricultural access easement across what would decades later become the northeast corner of the Sycamore Bluff clubhouse parcel. It had never expired. It ran with the land. Every developer, every title examiner, and every HOA board should have known it was there. That alone was enough to destroy Jeanette's fantasy of controlling the ground around the clubhouse, but it was not the real bomb. Before the subdivision existed, a small machine shop had occupied that same 1.4-acre parcel. Its owner took out a business loan. The loan defaulted during probate. A lien was recorded in 2012. Somehow, when the developer transferred the common area to the HOA in 2015, that lien was never cleared. It sat in the land records like a buried nail, rusting quietly beneath the clubhouse, the pool, and the parking lot. With Marcus's help, Reuben traced the debt through a chain of bank mergers until he found the successor institution still carrying it. The balance had grown to more than $44,000. Reuben bought the lien for $32,000 and stepped directly into the lender's legal position. Marcus filed an answer to the injunction motion. He added a counterclaim for abuse of process. Then he included one controlled little paragraph noting that his client now held a recorded lien interest against certain HOA common area property. That should have ended the war. It did not. With harvest season approaching and her legal footing collapsing, Jeanette lunged for one last show of force. She sent a fresh complaint package to the sheriff's office, alleging unlawful commercial activity, trespass over HOA ground, and dangerous traffic conditions. Then, before the busiest Saturday of cider season, she drove to the orchard herself and brought a deputy with her. She arrived before sunrise, believing she was about to shut down the orchard's biggest weekend of the year. Reuben had been waiting for exactly that kind of mistake.
When the cruiser and the HOA SUV rolled in, the orchard was still mostly shadow. Dew clung to the grass. Harvest bins sat stacked near the barn. Families would start arriving within hours for apples and cider, which made Guillette's timing painfully obvious. She had not come to clarify anything. she had come to cripple a business day, in public. Officer Daniels approached with procedural caution, complaint papers in hand. Guillette moved beside him with the brittle confidence of someone who believed authority could be borrowed just by standing close to it. She gestured toward the pump line, the gravel drive, the farm stand, and the far rows of trees, as if the entire landscape had finally fallen under her control. Reuben did not waste a second on outrage. He walked to his truck, opened the passenger door, retrieved a folder already arranged in exact order. County compliance letter on top, survey plat beneath it, deed copy next, recorded easement reference, lien assignment. Then he handed the folder to Daniels and explained the land around them with the calm precision of a man who had spent a career proving where lines actually lay. The orchard was lawful. The farm stand was protected agricultural use. The route Guillette insisted was HOA-controlled was burdened by a deeded easement older than the subdivision by more than half a century. And the parcel housing the HOA clubhouse, pool, and parking lot was carrying an undisclosed lien interest Reuben had lawfully purchased after finding it in the public record. The shift was immediate. Daniels stopped looking at the complaint packet and started studying the recorded documents. Guillette's posture hardened first, then faltered. One hand tightened around her phone. The certainty that had carried her out of the SUV began leaking away in visible stages. For the first time in 2 years, she was the one standing on ground she did not fully understand. Reuben did not threaten. He did not grandstand. He simply laid out the facts. If anyone had a paperwork crisis that morning, it was not the orchard. Daniels backed out almost at once. What Guillette had framed as a police matter was obviously a civil dispute wrapped around land defects, false complaints, and a campaign of harassment. By the time the deputy stepped away, Guillette looked less like an HOA president and more like a woman realizing her board, her lawyer, and eventually her own members were all about to learn exactly what she had walked into. She had called the cops to seize a legacy. Instead, she had delivered witnesses for her own collapse.
The fallout moved fast, because it had to. Once Marcus informed Gisette's attorney that the lien was real and recorded, disclosure became unavoidable. An HOA president could hide bruised pride. She could not quietly hide a material encumbrance on the clubhouse parcel while burning dues money on a personal crusade. Within days, homeowners inside Sycamore Bluff understood the shape of the disaster. Their reserve fund had been drained by legal bills. Their common area title was compromised. Their president had spent 2 years attacking a neighboring orchard she had no authority to regulate. Phones lit up. Email chains multiplied. Wendell Oaks and a block of furious homeowners used Virginia HOA law exactly as written and forced a special membership meeting. The room was packed. An accountant from the neighborhood laid out the numbers cleanly. More than $38,000 in legal fees. Reserve funds down by nearly a third. Nothing gained. Every complaint failed. Marcus then walked the members through the settlement framework. The title insurer would cover the lien and clear the clubhouse parcel. Reuben would be reimbursed for the attorney's fees the HOA campaign had forced him to spend, and a recorded covenant would permanently confirm that the HOA had no authority over the orchard. Future boards would not get to restart this war. The vote for settlement passed by a landslide. The vote urging Gisette's resignation followed the same direction. Reuben stood during open comment and finished the room with the one thing that mattered most. He made it clear he never wanted their pool, their parking lot, or their clubhouse. He wanted peace, clear records, and the freedom to work land his family had held since 1958. Then he distributed a 6-page timeline documenting every complaint, every filing, every dismissal, and every dollar burned along the way. No theatrics, just evidence. 11 days later, Gisette resigned.
6 weeks after that, the title insurance payout cleared the lien. Rubin recovered his legal fees and turned a legitimate profit on the defensive purchase. Sycamore Bluff elected a new president, Bernard Cho, a civil engineer with a radical platform by HOA standards, fiduciary discipline, and minding his own business. He ordered a full title review of all common area parcels. More defects were found. More were fixed, quietly, competently. The orchard had its best year on record. Rubin expanded the Saturday farm stand, added a pick-your-own program, and used part of the settlement money to create the Chester Callaway Agricultural Scholarship for local students pursuing farming, horticulture, environmental science, or land management. He recorded a conservation easement along the north edge of the property. He started an annual Orchard Heritage Festival. Families came, children pressed cider. Even a few Sycamore Bluff residents showed up, including some who had once backed Gisette. By the following autumn, the war had collapsed into something almost hard to believe. Neighbors buying apples, where legal threats had once been drafted. Rubin kept the deed, the plat, and the county records on his kitchen wall, not as trophies, as reminders. Land outlasted committees. Records outlasted bluster. And the people who bothered to read them often discovered that power looked very different on paper than it did in a parking lot. If an HOA tried to push you off what was yours, would you know your rights before it was too late? Let me know in the comments.